Hello, ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, and identities, and welcome back to another series review. And today's series review is The Office. Yes, The Office once again, but not The Office that is the British Office. This time, I decided to watch the US Office, and I've got to say, the first episode was very slow. However, I feel like the episodes on from it definitely get into the vibe of what the American Office is all about. It's about family, it's about friendship, it's about loss, it's about people being deceived, it's about people learning those deceptions. And most importantly, it's about an ordinary paper company finding their feet in a mad world. We have Jim in the blue shirt and Dwight in the kind of bronzish yellow shirt, and the pair of them are always bickering. The pair play pranks on one another and most of the time are adverse to one another. Dwight sees himself as the mass superpower from Star Wars, whereas Jim sees him as an annoying colleague that he likes to get a rise out of. Then we have on the other side, Pam and Andy. Now, Pam is madly, secretly in love with Jim, and Jim is secretly, madly in love with her. Pam is often overlooked in this company as just the secretary, and as the course of the series goes on, she proves to everyone in that office why that is not true. It doesn't matter what job someone does in Duddler Muflin, they all have a responsible role and they can all rise above it. Pam goes on to have two beautiful children and be very successful in painting murals for people. On the other side, we have Daryl. Daryl started off as someone who just worked downstairs in the warehouse. He was a warehouse manager for many, many years, and eventually he goes on to have a dream that is to be someone who represents sports stars, and he achieves that dream. Now, in the front, center, and middle of this whole picture, I think it's very important that we start this next segment off by talking about Michael Scott. Michael Scott is a guy who is very behind the times. He is sometimes seen as a bit of a racist, a bit of a sexist, and definitely a bit of a homophobic, well, until that very confusing scene where he decides to kiss Oscar. Michael Scott has some very, very wild relationships throughout this series. He goes out with a woman named Jen, who is his boss. He also goes out with the woman who happens to be the one who sold the house to him. But none could beat Holly. Oh, Holly. Michael had never known a woman like her, and as the old poem goes, he loved, he lost, he wept, he swept. He loved, he lost again. Michael and Holly's relationship is broken all due to the fact that she has to move to a different company. In that meantime, Michael tries to fill his void by going out with Pam's mum. Yes, you can make that joke. The boss did go out with someone's mum. However, Michael soon breaks up with her after realizing that Pam's mum just wants the quiet life. She's done everything she wants to achieve, and now she just wants someone to settle down with. But Michael doesn't want that. Michael wants someone wild, ambitious, someone who is daring, and doesn't mind that even though they're getting on, they'll still go off and do things. This was Holly. And Michael eventually gets the girl, but it takes him a very long time to get there. However, although Michael may be very controversial in the office, as he points out to everyone throughout the course of this series, Michael has one aim for everybody in the office. Michael has been at that paper company for 40 years. 40 years after the death of the guy who was his boss. His original boss, not the boss he went out with. But Michael, ever since then, has never left that office. He's never done another job. He's risen through the ranks. He's worked for corporate. And now he's in a position in which he is still striving to do everything amazing every single day. Michael's message to everyone in that office is 10, 20 years. Do you still want to be in this office? Because if you don't, take it whilst you've got it. Make the leap. Find a new way to live your life. And that's what Michael does. He pushes people in this series to be the best of what they can be. Now, I'm not just going to focus on the characters on this picture. So I thought it's about time I move on to someone like Angela. Angela loves Dwight, who is the one you saw at the back with the kind of yellowy top. Angela goes out with the mayor, and Angela kind of sleeps around in this story. It's a very confusing Angela story because she starts off as the kind of know-it-all that no one likes in the office. She also comes across in a kind of school teacher manner where she's constantly telling everyone off for what they're doing. Angela goes out with Dwight for a little while at the beginning of this series. Then she switches to Andy, but then she cheats on Andy behind his back with Dwight. Then she goes out with a senator, only to find out that the senator is gay and has been sleeping with Oscar. And then she goes back to Dwight. She marries Dwight in the end of this series. Now, regardless of my thoughts on this character, I definitely would say she's had an interesting story arc. Now let's move on to Oscar. Oscar is an openly gay character in this series who is basically trying to hide his sexuality for the first half of the series. He's in a position in which he doesn't really want to talk about it, but when he's outed, he finds himself in a position which actually makes him stronger rather than weaker. He then makes a video message to people out there about working at Duddler Muflin, and his colleagues mock him for it. But he has a very good point that if he can survive the office, then anyone can. Stanley. Stanley is a bit of a wild card. Stanley's had many affairs in the course of this series, behind closed doors and eventually coming to the forefront. But Stanley eventually lands on his feet after leaving the office. He goes on to make his own woodwork company where he makes wooden dolls of things. Stanley's very laid back in this series. Although he may have had all those affairs, he basically spends most of the time in the office just waiting for someone to give him something that he's actually interested about talking about. Another character I feel that we should mention in this office is, of course, Karen. Karen isn't in all of the office, but she's a very prominent character because she goes out with Jim for a while when Jim switches branches. This is when he first meets Andy, and this is before Andy transfers over to the main Duddler Muflin. Karen is a very independent character who I feel like definitely it's good to see that she's done a bit better than Jim, but I also feel like she's left in the dark too long. Her and Pam got along for a very long time. However, the hatchet was never truly buried in the series. Another character who's very prominent in this series for an ironic reason is Pam's ex. Pam's ex worked down in the warehouse and was a bit of a rough, tough guy, a bit rude to Jim sometimes, but also a bit rude to a lot of people in the office. His macho bravado definitely goes across most of the time. He also, ironically, when Pam actually goes to his wedding, suddenly can play the piano. But let's get back to the main plot of The Office. The Office follows all these groups of people finding their way in the world. What did I think of the American Office compared to the British Office? I thought it was very interesting. I really like the character of Michael Scott as you go along. I feel like he's very misunderstood in the beginning, but slowly but surely after a while, he begins to open up to people, and you find that him and Dwight are very similar in that way. When Dwight first tried to be the boss in the office, he accidentally shoots someone through the ear. Then gets sacked by a group called Sabre, and then moves on. But all these characters have their great revelations in this series, and that's why I give the US Office a solid 10 out of 10. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next series review. Until then, goodbye, stay beautiful, and have an incredible night, you beautiful people.